What would you do if the man you were forced to marry, rumored to be crippled, hidden from his own wedding, suddenly stood before you with secrets that could burn an empire? What if the family meant to protect you was the very hand that tried to destroy him? And when lies unravel into power, would you have the strength to survive the truth? The bride who shouldn't be. The day my sister was supposed to marry, I was the one walking down the aisle. I can still feel the weight of the silk, heavy not from fabric but from the absurdity of it all. Imagine that, your sister's name printed on the invitations, her face rehearsed in every family photograph, and yet you're the one in white, standing where she should have been. Absurd is too small a word. Some might call it scandal. I call it survival. My name is Vivian Lancaster. To the world, the Lancasters were once old money, respected pillars of New York's gilded society. To me, we were a house built on shifting sand, the kind of sand that buries you if you're foolish enough to stand still. Since my mother's death, I'd been nothing more than an accessory in that house, kept but never cherished, tolerated but never loved. My father, Richard, believed obedience was his virtue. In truth, it was his curse. He bowed to his second wife in everything, as though Cecilia Zhao had cast some spell over him. And maybe she had. Her power was not kindness, but calculation. Her only true devotion was to her daughter, my younger sister Natalie. To Cecilia, Natalie was the jewel. I was only the box that once held it. Natalie was the one meant to marry Adrian Cole, the heir to the Cole dynasty, a family so deeply entwined with Wall Street that their sigh could sway the markets. But Natalie refused. She wept, raged, whispered poison into our stepmother's ear. "He's crippled, Mama. A man who cannot walk is a man who cannot command. Marry me to him, and I might as well be dead." Cecilia stroked her daughter's hair, then turned those sharp eyes on me. "Vivian," she said softly, almost sweetly, "you've always been the stronger one. Your sister is delicate, fragile. How could she survive in that cold household? But you could endure." Endure. That was the word she chose, as though marriage to Adrian Cole were not a union but a sentence. For a moment, I almost pitied Natalie. Almost. But then I remembered every birthday where she blew out the candles while I cleared the plates, every dress that hung in her closet while I wore hand-me-downs, every embrace my father gave her while my presence went unnoticed. The pity dissolved. I asked for something in return. Not out of greed, but out of defiance. The Lancaster country estate, the only thing my mother had left me before Cecilia claimed it as her own, and $50 million. The demand cracked the air like a whip. My father stammered. Cecilia's smile stiffened, and Natalie gasped as though I had cursed her. For a heartbeat, I thought they would refuse. For a heartbeat, I almost wanted them to. But they didn't. They agreed. And in that moment, the game shifted. You might ask, why 50 million? Why the house? The truth is simple. In a family where I was invisible, I wanted proof that I had ever existed, proof that I could not be erased. That's how I found myself walking into St. Augustine's Cathedral with a borrowed crown on my head and a groom nowhere in sight. The Cole family explained that Adrian was unwell, too weak to appear in public, so they placed a portrait of him at the altar, a man with a jaw carved from marble, eyes like black glass, lips pressed into a line sharp enough to draw blood. Even as an image, he seemed alive. Alive enough to frighten me. Alive enough to make me wonder if this entire arrangement was less a marriage than a trap. I stood before that portrait, my heart beating too fast, and I wondered, what kind of man hides behind a frame? What kind of power lives in absence? The vows were said. I spoke the words that bound me to a man I had never touched, never even heard breathe. The applause was thin, brittle. When I walked out into the afternoon light, I felt not like a bride, but like an imposter dressed for execution. But here is the secret no one else knew. I didn't feel defeated. I felt dangerous. For once, I wasn't the girl hiding in her sister's shadow. For once, the world had looked at me. Still, a question gnawed at me, louder than the organ's echo. Why had the Coles allowed this switch? Did Adrian know? Did he care? Was I a placeholder bride, destined to be discarded once the truth surfaced? Or had the game already begun, with me as its first unwitting player? I tell you this, nothing about that day was chance. Not my demands, not their agreement, not even the empty space where a groom should have stood. Something else was moving beneath the surface, something darker than my sister's tears, something sharper than my stepmother's cruelty. And as I left the cathedral with strangers whispering behind gloved hands, I realized the story I'd stepped into was not about my sister, or even about me. It was about Adrian Cole, the man who did not appear, the man who might not even need to, because sometimes the greatest power isn't in presence, it's in absence. And whatever secret Adrian Cole was hiding, I was now his wife, bound to him, bound to it. That day, I thought I had bargained for freedom. Instead, I had bought my way into the most dangerous game of my life. And the question that would haunt me from that first step down the aisle was not whether I could survive the marriage. It was whether I could survive the man. The cold groom and the fiery mother. The wedding had ended in whispers, the kind that crawl across polished floors and slither beneath closed doors. I thought the worst had passed, that the hollow ceremony with a portrait for a groom would be the most humiliating moment of my life. But humiliation, I soon learned, was only the prologue. The true story began on the night that followed. It was nearly midnight when I found myself alone in the bridal suite, a room so vast and ornate, it felt less like a chamber than a stage designed for someone else's play. The chandeliers glowed too brightly, the silk drapes seemed too heavy, and every glittering detail pressed on me like judgment. I slipped off the jewels one by one, each piece falling to the marble table with the sound of chains breaking. I breathed as though I could finally shed the weight of the day. Perhaps if I slept, the nightmare might dissolve into silence. But the door creaked open before I could reach the bed. My pulse faltered. At first, I thought it was a servant, or perhaps a trick of the wind. Then, the wheels whispered against the floor. A figure entered, the shadows cutting around him like reluctant curtains. And there he was, Adrian Cole. The man who had hidden behind a portrait now sat before me in flesh and blood. A tailored black suit sculpted to his frame, his hands resting with calculated ease on the armrests of a wheelchair. His face sharper, colder, far more arresting than the photo, seemed carved by a hand that understood both beauty and cruelty. And his eyes, they held no trace of apology. They measured me like a hawk circling prey. He spoke my sister's name, slow, deliberate. Natalie Lancaster. His voice was smoke, low, rough-edged, dangerously seductive. My throat dried. I should have corrected him gently, deferentially. Instead, I stood taller than I felt. No, Vivian, her sister. The silence that followed was suffocating. His lips curved, but it was not a smile. It was a knife. He laughed softly, a sound without warmth. Your family has courage, he murmured, or perhaps they've simply gone mad. Was this the moment he would dismiss me? Cast me out of this house as though I had never stepped into it? Would he roll to the phone, summon his lawyers, and end the farce before the ink dried on the marriage papers? The thought chilled me, but another thought cut deeper. What if he didn't? What if he kept me here, in this house of shadows, for reasons I couldn't yet name? Before I could speak, the air shifted. He moved closer, his wheelchair gliding with an almost imperceptible hum. There was no clumsiness in the way he approached. Each motion was smooth, controlled, deliberate. As though weakness was something he allowed others to believe, but never permitted himself to feel. I had expected pity, or perhaps indifference. But the truth was worse. He radiated dominance, an aura so heavy I felt the weight of it in my lungs. This was not a man diminished. This was a man disguised. And just as the silence stretched too tight, heels clicked against the marble outside the door. The latch turned, and a woman swept in, as though the house itself bent to her will. Lady Serena Cole. Her presence was a storm wrapped in silk, every step a declaration of supremacy. She wore a gown the color of emerald fire, her hair knotted into perfection, her bearing both regal and lethal. I braced myself for wrath. Surely she had come to strip me bare with words, to humiliate me for being the imposter bride. Instead, she walked past her son's chair without so much as a glance and came straight to me. She took my hand in both of hers, hands warmer than I expected, though her eyes were sharp as obsidian. Vivian, she said, and my name in her voice sounded like a benediction. My dear child, what they did to you is shameful, but you must know this. In this house, you are not a mistake. You are the mistress. Mistress. The word struck like lightning. She slid a jade bracelet from her wrist and clasped it around mine. Cold, heavy, impossibly valuable. Her gaze locked on mine with something between tenderness and command. From this night forward, anyone who dares insult you dares insult me, and I will not forgive them. My knees weakened. Was this real? A mother-in-law defending me against her own son, against the family I had come to fear? What game was she playing? Adrian's jaw tightened, his dark eyes narrowing. "Mother," he said, voice edged with steel, "do you even know what you're doing?" Lady Serena did not so much as flinch. She stroked my hand as though soothing a frightened bird. "I know exactly what I'm doing. The Lancasters threw away a jewel because they mistook it for glass. That is their loss. But you, Vivian, you will not be discarded again." For the first time in years, I felt heat behind my eyes. Not shame, not rage. Something gentler, more dangerous, hope. But I knew enough of the world to mistrust hope. Hope was the sweetest bait in the cruelest traps. I could feel Adrian's stare burning into me, a silent storm raging beneath his composure. Did he despise me more for his mother's words? Or did he fear her loyalty shifting to me? And why did I feel, deep in my chest, that her embrace was not charity, but strategy? Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to you all from Dran. If you're gripped by this story and want to hear what happens next, the secrets, the betrayals, the dangers hiding behind those mansion walls, please subscribe to Dran. Your support gives us strength to bring you more stories like this, stories that unravel the masks and reveal the truth beneath. So I ask you, what happens when a bride steps into a marriage where the groom despises her, yet the mother-in-law crowns her queen? Is this protection or another trap? What lies behind Adrian's cold eyes, behind Lady Serena's sudden warmth? And what kind of war have I been dragged into on the very night of my wedding? That night, I realized I had not walked into a family. I had walked into an arena. And every word, every gesture, every jewel slipped onto my wrist was not affection, but a weapon. The question was no longer whether I belonged here. The question was whether I could survive the battle that had only just begun. The man who could walk the house at night was not silent. It breathed. The long corridors whispered with drafts that came from nowhere. The chandeliers swayed as though touched by unseen hands, and the portraits of dead coals seemed to watch my every step. Perhaps they knew what I did not yet know, that my place here was not chance, but design. Adrian Cole had said little since his mother's declaration. He had wheeled himself closer to me, close enough that the sharp scent of mint on his skin cut through the heavy perfume of roses in the room. His eyes pinned me to the spot. "Do not mistake her favor for safety," he said. His voice was quiet, but it slid into me like a blade. "A queen without power is only a pawn dressed in silk." I forced myself not to look away. "Then perhaps you should be more afraid of the pawn than the queen." For a moment, something flickered across his face. Amusement, perhaps, or irritation so sharp it bent into something else. Then he laughed, low and bitter. "You think courage is enough? You think surviving the Lancasters has prepared you for this house?" What he meant, I did not know, but the way he said this house made my skin tighten. That night, I did not sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ornate ceiling, hearing every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of leaves against the windows. And beneath it all, one thought repeated like a drumbeat. Why had Lady Serena chosen me? Why did she seem so certain I was meant to stand in Natalie's place? Morning brought no clarity. At breakfast, the long dining table stretched like a battlefield. Adrian sat at one end, a simple bowl of oatmeal before him. Lady Serena sat beside me, commanding the room with her poise, while before me lay a spread fit for a queen: steamed lobster, fresh fruit, rare teas. The message was clear. I was to be seen as cherished. And yet, when Adrian's gaze fell on me, there was no warmth, only suspicion. Then, without warning, the butler announced two visitors, my stepmother and sister. Cecilia Zhao polished to a gleam, and Natalie, dressed in pale silk, her eyes shimmering with crocodile tears. "Vivian," Natalie whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you well? Mother and I were so worried. We barely slept a wink." I almost laughed aloud. Worried? The same sister who shoved me into this cage of marble now feigned concern before the coals. Did she think I would play along? But before I could speak, Lady Serena's teacup clinked sharply against the saucer. "Your concern is unnecessary, Miss Lancaster." My daughter-in-law is in her own home. She is safe, cherished, and exactly where she belongs. Cecilia's painted smile froze. Natalie's lips quivered and her eyes darted to Adrian, desperate for his recognition. "Adrian," she whispered, deliberately dropping the formality. I've prayed for your health. Do you feel stronger?" For the first time, I saw Adrian's mask crack. His eyes turned glacial. "Miss Lancaster," he said, each syllable like ice striking glass, "we are not familiar. Do not address me with such intimacy." The silence that followed was brutal. Natalie's cheeks burned crimson, Cecilia stiffened, and I almost felt pity. Almost. But Lady Serena was not finished. Her voice, velvet with iron beneath, sliced through the air. "Tell me, Cecilia, how does it feel to throw away a diamond and hold on to glass? Does regret weigh heavy on your shoulders?" Cecilia choked on a reply. Natalie sat rigid, her eyes darting between us like a trapped bird. And in that moment I realized, this was not mere protection. This was war, and I was Lady Serena's chosen weapon. But why? Why me? That night, the questions burned so hot that I found myself wandering the halls until I reached the library. Adrian was already there, his chair angled toward the fire. He didn't turn as I entered. "You enjoy playing their game," he said softly. "But do you understand the cost?" "I didn't choose the game," I replied, "but I won't lose it." Finally, he turned. The firelight carved shadows across his face, making him look both more human and more dangerous. "Lose? You don't yet know the rules, and those who don't know the rules are the first to bleed." I wanted to ask what he meant, but then his gaze dropped, just briefly, and I noticed something that turned my blood to ice. His hand gripping the wheel of the chair trembled, not with weakness but with control. A muscle too taut, too deliberate, as though he were restraining strength rather than straining against weakness. Could it be? Was the chair not what it seemed? I remembered how effortlessly he had moved the night before, how his eyes carried not despair but defiance. Could Adrian Cole walk? Had his so-called weakness been a mask all along? And if so, why hide it? Questions swarmed my mind. Was his family deceived? Was Lady Serena complicit? Or was I the only one who now suspected the truth? I did not ask. Not then. But from that moment on, every glance, every movement of his body, I studied with sharpened eyes. Because if Adrian was hiding his strength, then it was not just my sister or stepmother I needed to fear. It was him. And what is more dangerous than a man the world underestimates? A man who allows everyone to believe he is broken while he waits for the perfect moment to strike? The walls of the Cole mansion seemed to close in tighter with each passing day. My stepmother and sister plotted in shadows. Lady Serena whispered promises that felt like commands. And Adrian watched me, silent and unyielding, as though he were daring me to uncover the truth. But the real question was not whether I would uncover it. The question was whether I could survive it. The father's betrayal. I had lived in the Cole mansion for less than a week when the first undeniable crack appeared in Adrian's carefully crafted mask. It was past midnight, and I had risen to fetch water from the kitchen. The halls were dark, the sconces unlit, but the faint glow of moonlight traced a path along the marble floors. That was when I heard it, a sound not meant to exist in silence. The steady, rhythmic strike of footsteps, not wheels. Footsteps. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. Slowly, I edged closer to the grand staircase, and there he was. Adrian Cole. No wheelchair, no crutches, his frame tall, powerful, perfectly balanced as he descended the stairs like a shadow carved from moonlight. The sight was both terrifying and electrifying. For days, I had suspected. Now I knew. He could walk. Why had he deceived everyone? Why had he allowed the world to call him broken when he was anything but? I hid behind the column, every muscle screaming to move, yet rooted by awe and dread. He reached the bottom of the staircase, his gaze lifting suddenly, as though he could sense my presence even in darkness. I ducked back, silent, my breath shallow. Did he see me? Did he know? I returned to my room with my pulse thundering like war drums. Sleep was impossible. My mind spun in circles. If Adrian's disability was a lie, then the marriage, the family politics, every whispered word in this mansion, they all concealed something larger, something lethal. The following morning, I dared to test him. At breakfast, when his chair rolled silently beside me, I leaned close enough for only him to hear. "Strange," I murmured, my voice laced with mock curiosity. The house is so quiet at night, except for the sound of footsteps. His spoon stilled halfway to his lips. He turned his head slowly, those obsidian eyes locking onto mine with a sharpness that could cut glass. For a moment, the mask slipped. Fury? Or was it fear? Then it was gone, replaced with his usual glacial calm. "If you wander at night," he said softly, "you may see things that will keep you awake forever." It wasn't denial. It was a warning. And warnings in the Cole mansion were never idle. That day, I began to dig. Quietly. Carefully. If Adrian's secret was tied to his past, then somewhere in this city, records existed. Hospital files. Reports of the accident that had supposedly left him in a chair. But who would have the power to access files sealed tighter than a bank vault? I thought of an old friend, Elias Monroe, a surgeon I had known during my brief years studying abroad. A man too brilliant for his own good, and one who owed me a favor. That evening, I slipped out under the guise of visiting a charity function, and by midnight, I sat in Elias's dimly lit office, the hum of his computer filling the silence. He hesitated before sliding a tablet across the desk. "Vivian, if anyone discovers I gave this to you, my career is finished." On the screen glowed Adrian's medical records. I scrolled through line after line, my fingers trembling. A car crash 3 years ago, severe spinal trauma, initial diagnosis, permanent paralysis. But then, months of rehabilitation, notes from world-renowned specialists. And finally, the words that made my blood run cold. Full recovery achieved. Patient can walk unaided. My suspicions were true, but one more line beneath the summary shattered me. Brake system failure consistent with sabotage, likely intentional. Sabotage. The crash wasn't an accident. Someone had tried to kill Adrian Cole. I left Elias's office with the city lights blurring around me. Every step back toward the mansion felt heavier. My mind reeled. Who would want him dead? His enemies in business? A rival family? Or someone inside his own bloodline? When I entered the house, Adrian was waiting in the drawing room, his wheelchair angled perfectly, his posture composed. His eyes met mine the moment I stepped through the door. "You've been busy," he said. I froze. Did he know where I had been? What I had seen? His lips curved in that dangerous half-smile. "Tell me, Vivian, do you believe everything you read?" It was not a question. It was a challenge. I wanted to demand answers, to scream at him for the lies, the deception, the danger he had dragged me into. But the weight of his stare, the power coiled in his silence, stole the words from me. I realized then, if Adrian knew that I knew, the game would change forever. But hadn't it already? For days after, I lived in two worlds. By day, I played the dutiful bride, accepting Lady Serena's gifts, enduring the poisonous visits of my stepmother and sister. By night, I replayed the image of Adrian descending the stairs, strong and unbroken, and the chilling word that haunted every breath. Sabotage. Was his wheelchair a mask to flush out his enemies? Was I, unknowingly, a pawn in his trap? Or worse, was I the bait? And yet, there was a part of me, a reckless, dangerous part, that burned with something else. Admiration. Even desire. Because what is more intoxicating than a man who wears weakness like armor, only to reveal strength that terrifies? I am telling you this now, because what happened next would change everything. It was during a family dinner. The entire household gathered under the glittering chandeliers. Caviar gleamed on silver trays, champagne sparkled in crystal glasses, and beneath it all, tension coiled like a serpent ready to strike. Lady Serena raised her glass to me, to her daughter-in-law, the future of the Cole family. And then Adrian spoke. His voice cut through the hall like a blade. The future of this family does not lie in her hands. It lies in mine. Every head turned. My stepmother smirked, Natalie gasped, Lady Serena stiffened, and me? My breath caught as Adrian pushed back his chair, then, with deliberate precision, stood. He stood. Gasps erupted. Wine spilled. Even Lady Serena's mask cracked as shock flickered across her regal face. Adrian Cole stood tall, his shadow stretching long across the table, and his voice thundered with the power of a man who had never been broken. "My father tried to bury me with lies," he declared, "but I am not crippled. I am not weak, and I will not be dethroned." The room dissolved into chaos. Cecilia's face drained of color. Natalie nearly collapsed. Lady Serena rose in fury, and my heart pounded with fear and awe in equal measure. The man I had married in shadows was no longer pretending. He was unveiling himself, and with it, he was declaring war. And as his hand reached out to me, steady and commanding, I understood the truth. I was no pawn. I was his ally, his shield, perhaps even his weapon. But could I trust him? Or was I merely the latest player in a game older and bloodier than I could comprehend? If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. It may seem like a small action, but for us, it's a huge encouragement that fuels our passion to bring you even more captivating real-life stories. So I leave you with this question. When a man who pretends to be broken finally reveals his strength, does it mean salvation for those beside him, or destruction for everyone in his path? The answer, as I would soon learn, was far more terrifying than I ever imagined. The Real Vows. The night Adrian revealed his secret strength, the Cole mansion became a battlefield. The revelation rippled through every corridor, tearing apart loyalties, igniting old rivalries, and dragging me into the very heart of a war that had been simmering for years. I had thought myself an intruder, an imposter, a substitute bride, but now I stood at the very center of a storm I could no longer escape. Adrian's father, Leonard Cole, returned within hours of the outburst, his presence filling the great hall like a shadow older and darker than the house itself. He was a man carved from ambition and cruelty, his voice thunderous, his glare a weapon sharpened by decades of unchecked power. He did not see a son. He saw a threat, and for the first time, I saw the true source of the chains Adrian had chosen to wear. "You defy me with this farce?" Jonathan spat, his eyes narrowing as Adrian stood tall before him. "You were supposed to stay silent, hidden. Do you think this family can endure the scandal of your deception? You will destroy us all." Adrian's voice was steady, calm, terrifying in its certainty. "No, father, the lies would have destroyed us, but the truth, that I survived, that I endured, will be our salvation, and it is the truth you feared most." The clash between them was not of fists, but of wills. Years of unspoken hatred, betrayal, and pain hung in the air like smoke. And I, caught between them, felt the walls closing in. I thought of the files I had read, the word that still echoed like thunder in my mind: sabotage. Had Leonard Cole himself orchestrated the attempt on his son's life? Had he tried to bury Adrian beneath the wreckage of twisted steel, just to replace him with a more pliable heir? I wanted to ask, to scream, to demand answers. But my voice was trapped in my chest. It was Lady Serena who broke the silence. Rising from her chair, she stood beside Adrian, her eyes aflame with a fury I had never seen before. "Jonathan, you tried to shatter him. You tried to bury the son who carries your blood, your name, your legacy. And still he rose. You will not destroy him again, not while I breathe." The room fractured. Jonathan's allies recoiled. Lady Serena's loyalists stepped forward. And suddenly, the mansion was not a home, but a court of judgment. I felt my heart hammer as all eyes turned to me. For in that moment, I realized I was no longer invisible. My voice mattered, my choice mattered, and the silence I had carried all my life could no longer shield me. I stepped forward, my hands trembling but my gaze unbroken. "This family has fed on lies long enough," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "You wanted a pawn, Jonathan. You wanted a bride to serve your schemes, a wife who would kneel in gratitude for scraps. But I am not here to kneel, and I am not here to run. I am here to stand, with Adrian, with the truth." Adrian's eyes met mine then, not cold, not mocking, but burning with something raw and unguarded. It was not victory. It was not even power. It was recognition. The battle that followed was swift, brutal, and final. Leonard Cole, stripped of his influence by Adrian's carefully guarded secrets and Lady Serena's ruthless command, fell not by blade but by exposure. His crimes, financial and personal, were unveiled, his empire crumbling beneath the weight of truths too long hidden. He left the mansion that night not as a patriarch, but as a man defeated by his own ambition. And when the storm passed, when the last whisper of rebellion quieted, I found myself standing in a silence I had never known before. Not the silence of erasure, not the silence of invisibility, but the silence of peace. Adrian stood at my side, no wheelchair, no mask, no lies. Just a man, flawed, scarred, yet unbroken. He reached for my hand, his grip strong and steady. "You could have walked away," he said softly. "You had every reason to, but you stayed." I looked at him, at the man who had once terrified me, and I felt the weight of every choice I had made, every humiliation I had endured, every scar I carried. And for the first time, those scars did not feel like chains. They felt like proof. Proof that I was more than the girl who lived in her sister's shadow. Proof that I had become someone who could stand in the fire and not be consumed. We were not two broken people bound by circumstance. We were survivors. And perhaps, just perhaps, we could be something more. In the days that followed, whispers of the Cole family's fall and rebirth spread through the city. My stepmother and sister, once so certain of their victory, found themselves outcast, their ambitions turned to ash. Lady Serena, ever the queen, declared Adrian and I the future of the family, and for once, I believed her words were not chains but blessings. And me? I walked through the mansion's halls not as a ghost, but as a woman who had been tested and had not broken. But here is the truth I want to leave with you. Life will place you in shadows not of your choosing. It will silence you, erase you, convince you that your worth is measured only in how much you can endure. But endurance is not weakness. It is the fire that tempers steel. And when the moment comes to step into the light, you will discover that every scar was not a mark of loss, but of survival. So I ask you this, what chains are you still carrying that were never truly yours? What lies have you believed about yourself because someone else whispered them long enough? And when your moment comes, because it will you choose to kneel or will you choose to stand? For me, the answer came in the form of a man I had once feared and a family I had once despised. And though our story is far from over, I know this. I am no pawn. I am no shadow. I am Vivian Lancaster Cole, and I will never be invisible again. And perhaps that is the greatest truth of all. Sometimes the life you fear most is the life that finally sets you free. When I look back on everything, the forced wedding, the humiliation, the secrets revealed in the shadows of that mansion, I realize that none of it was simply about love or power. It was about identity. For years, I believed I was invisible, a discarded daughter living in the shadow of a favored sister and a manipulative stepmother. I thought survival meant silence, that to endure was to fade. But what I discovered is that silence can be shattered, and endurance can become the very thing that transforms you into someone unbreakable. Vivian Lancaster Cole's journey is not just the story of a woman caught in the games of a powerful family. It is the story of anyone who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. She began as a pawn, forced into a marriage she did not choose, burdened with the weight of other people's decisions. But by the end, she stood as a woman who defined herself, not by what was taken from her, but by what she chose to reclaim. The truth is, we all face moments when the world tells us who we are supposed to be, when others try to write our story for us. It may not be as dramatic as a marriage into a dynasty or the betrayal of a parent, but the pressure is real. The boss who silences your ideas, the family that favors another, the society that insists on measuring you by standards you never agreed to. In those moments, it is tempting to remain quiet, to let the world pass you by. But silence is never the end of the story. The lesson here is simple yet profound. Endurance is not weakness. Every time you survive a slight, a dismissal, a betrayal, you are not diminished. You are being tempered. And when the right moment comes, you will realize that every scar you carry is not a mark of defeat, but of survival. Like Vivian, you may discover that the life you feared most is the one that finally sets you free. So ask yourself, what story have you been told about yourself that isn't true? What chains have you carried simply because someone else placed them on your shoulders? And most importantly, when the moment comes to choose, will you kneel or will you stand? If you felt the weight of invisibility, let Vivian's journey remind you. You are not defined by the shadows cast upon you. You are defined by the light you decide to step into. And if this story has stirred something in you, I warmly invite you to join the Dran community, where we explore more tales of survival, truth, and transformation. Together, we uncover stories that not only entertain, but also inspire. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to Dran. It may seem like a small action, but for us, it is a powerful encouragement that fuels our passion to bring you even more captivating stories in the future.